My father-in-law shook my hand at the graveside and told me I was the strongest woman he'd ever known. 48 hours later, his attorney called to say my husband had left me a storage facility I'd never been allowed to see. Not a locker. A facility. 32 units on 4 acres outside Lubbock, Texas, that my husband had owned for 9 years while I thought he drove a leased F-150 and worried about the electric bill. His name was Edmund. We'd been married for 7 years, together for 9, and I was 31 years old and standing in our kitchen in Amarillo when I found out he had a whole other financial life I hadn't touched. The attorney's name was Mr. Holt. He had an office that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee, and he slid a manila folder across his desk like he was doing me a favor. Inside was a property deed, a storage unit management contract, and a handwritten note in Edmund's blocky print. Nadia, don't sell anything until you go yourself. The key is in the lockbox at Unit 7. Password is your birthday. There's something there you need to see before anyone else does. Don't let my brother near it. I read that last sentence twice. Don't let my brother near it. My brother-in-law had been texting me since the funeral. Condolences, dinner invitations, offers to help me go through Edmund's things. His name was Theo, and he was 4 years older than Edmund and had always been the one at family dinners who talked too loud and picked up the check and made sure everyone noticed. I'd never disliked him. I'd never had a reason to. Mr. Holt was watching me read. He cleared his throat. Edmund filed a deed transfer 6 months before his passing. Everything is in your name. The property is fully paid off, taxes current through next year. Why didn't he tell me? I asked. He folded his hands on the desk. He asked me not to share details until the time came. He was a private man. I drove home in a kind of fog. Edmund had been private, yes. Quiet in the way some men are quiet, where you stop asking about certain things because the answers never quite come. I'd assumed that was just how he was. I hadn't thought it was hiding. That evening I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't drink and my phone face down in front of me. Theo called twice. I let it go to voicemail both times. The third time I picked up. Nadia. His voice was warm and a little rough, the way it always got when he was performing sincerity. I've been thinking about you all day. How are you holding up? I'm okay, I said. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about some things Edmund mentioned before he passed. About the business, some loose ends he'd been meaning to tie up. He talked to me about it a few weeks ago, and I just want to make sure you're not left holding something you don't know how to handle. I kept my voice level. What business? A pause. He didn't mention it to you. We can talk about it later, I said. I'm not ready for logistics yet. He made a sympathetic sound and said to call him whenever I was ready. We hung up. I sat there for a long time. Edmund had known something was coming. He'd had 9 months from the diagnosis to the end, and in that time he had transferred the deed, written a note, and told his attorney not to talk until he was gone. He'd also told me, specifically and clearly, not to let his brother near it before I even knew what it was. I booked a drive to Lubbock for the next morning. The facility was on a flat stretch of road south of the city, bordered on one side by a chain-link fence and on the other by a strip of dead grass that bluffed into scrubland. The sign up front read, Ridgemont Self-Storage in sun-faded red. It looked like 100 other storage places I'd driven past without thinking twice. Nothing about it said my husband's name. Nothing about it said secret. A woman named Cheryl managed the front office. She had reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck and shook my hand with both of hers when I introduced myself. Mrs. Crane, she said, I'm so sorry about Edmund. He was a good man. Always on time with the owner fees, always called ahead if anything needed attention. How long did you know him? I asked. 7 years, give or take. He'd come by a few times a year to check on things. Sometimes just walk the property, sometimes just a couple of hours. She paused. He never brought anyone with him. I always assumed he was the type who liked to do things alone. I thanked her and walked out to the units. The facility was laid out in 4 rows, 8 units per row. The largest were at the back. Climate-controlled, Cheryl had mentioned, installed 3 years ago at Edmund's direction and expense. Unit 7 was in the second row, middle of the block. The lockbox was mounted beside the door, a small black box with a keypad. I typed in my birthday. The key inside was a standard padlock key, except it was tagged with a piece of blue electrical tape that had a number written on it in Sharpie. Not 7. 14. I stood there for a moment in the Texas heat and looked at the number. Then I walked to Unit 14. The door rolled up with a sound like a held breath releasing. Inside, the air was cool and dry and slightly medicinal, the kind of air that's been filtered and temperature controlled for years. The unit was maybe 12 by 20. Metal shelving lined both walls, floor to ceiling, filled with labeled plastic bins and cardboard file boxes. In the center of the floor sat a folding table with a laptop, a portable hard drive, and a yellow legal pad. On top of the legal pad was another note in Edmund's handwriting. You found it. I knew you would. The laptop password is the name of the dog you had when you were 12. Everything you need is in the folder called FORN. I'm sorry I didn't explain this while I was alive. I was afraid of what it would cost you to know. But you need to know now, and you need to know it before Theo does anything else. I sat down in the folding chair and stared at the laptop for a while. The dog's name was Biscuit. I felt something loosen in my throat when I typed it. The FORN folder contained 47 files, spreadsheets, scanned contracts, photographs of documents, and 3 video files recorded in what looked like this exact unit. I clicked the oldest one first. Edmund appeared on screen looking healthy, maybe 2 years younger. He was sitting in the same folding chair. He looked tired but steady. Nadia, he said, if you're watching this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry. Let me explain what I built here and why I kept it from you. He explained for 11 minutes. Ridgemont Self-Storage had started as a distressed property auction purchase. Edmund had bought it for $180,000 in cash from a savings account his grandfather had left him. The same account he'd never mentioned to me because he'd promised his grandfather to keep it separate until he knew what he wanted to do with it. Over 7 years, he'd renovated the units, added climate control, and built consistent revenue. The facility grossed $28,000 a month on average. He'd kept it from me not because he didn't trust me, but because Theo had approached him 3 years ago about becoming a co-owner. Edmund had said no. Theo had brought it up again 6 months later, and then had started hinting to their parents that Edmund had inherited more than he'd shared, and that it was causing tension in the family. Edmund had been managing the fallout quietly, keeping the property documents private, trying to find a way to end it without a fight, and then he'd gotten sick and run out of time. He's going to tell you he helped me build it, Edmund said in the video. He didn't. He found out about it the same way everyone finds things out. Someone talked. He's been trying to get his name on the deed for 3 years. Don't let him. Every document he might show you has been exaggerated or fabricated. The real records are in those bins. Everything is labeled. You'll find his request letters in the red bin on the right. I saved all of them. I sat in that unit for 2 hours. Theo called while I was still there. I let it ring. Then he texted, "Hey Nadia, was hoping we could connect soon about the Lubbock property. I know it's soon, but I want to make sure you're protected before things get complicated." I took a photo of the text and saved it to my phone. I drove back to Amarillo that evening with the portable hard drive on the passenger seat and Edmund's legal pad on top of my bag. I went through a drive-through because I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and the act of ordering something concrete felt like something I could do. I sat in a parking lot and ate chicken strips and tried to understand the shape of what I'd just walked into. My husband had owned a $28,000 a month business for 7 years. He had documented his brother's attempts to claim a share of it. He had put everything in my name, and he had died without telling me any of it, because he was trying to protect me from the conflict, and then he'd run out of time to resolve it himself. I wasn't angry at him. I wanted to be, and I tried, and I couldn't get there. He'd been careful. He'd been thorough. He'd just also been wrong about how much time he had. Back home, I opened the hard drive on my own laptop and went through every file in the FORN folder. The red bin at the facility held what Edmund had described: 11 letters from Theo over 3 years. each one escalating. The early ones were casual, almost friendly. The later ones cited verbal agreements and family understandings and an expectation established at the time of purchase. One referenced a document he claimed proved Edmund had promised him a 25% stake. I found that document in a separate folder Edmund had labelled fabricated. It was a contract on plain paper with Edmund's signature that didn't quite look like Edmund's signature. I put the original, the one Theo had presumably sent as a copy, side by side with a birthday card Edmund had written me 5 years ago. The pen pressure was different. The slant was different. The way he crossed his T's was different. I called Mr. Holt the next morning. I found the storage unit, I said. I found the hard drive. I need to know what legal steps I should take. He was quiet for a moment. Edmund said you'd be efficient about it. He left a note that said, "Don't let his brother near the property. His brother has already texted me about it. And there's a document in his files with what looks like a forged signature." Mr. Holt's voice shifted. "Send me photos of that document today. I'll have an estate attorney review the signature issue and draft a cease and desist if the contact continues." I sent everything that afternoon. Then I went back to the facility. Cheryl was watering a small pot of marigolds on the office windowsill when I pulled in. She raised a hand in greeting and then, when she saw my face, came around the desk. "You've been in the records," she said. It wasn't a question. "I have," I said. "How much did you know?" She sighed and offered me a chair. "Not specifics, but Edmund told me about 8 months ago that his brother had been asking questions about the place. He asked me not to share any operational information with anyone other than him or whoever he designated. He put it in writing." She opened a drawer and handed me a notarized letter, Edmund's signature, a date 18 months ago. Specific instructions that the facility manager was not to release any information about ownership, revenue, or tenants to any party other than Edmund Crane or his designated representative. "Did his brother contact you?" I asked. "Once," she said. "About 6 months back. Said he was Edmund's business partner and needed the monthly revenue summary. I told him we didn't have any record of a business partner and directed him to the owner." She paused. "He wasn't happy about that. I asked her to write up a summary of that interaction and she did it without being asked twice. I left the facility with another page of documentation. That evening, Theo called again. This time I answered. "Nadia, I've been trying to reach you." "I know," I said. "What do you need, Theo?" "I just want to help you understand what you've inherited. That facility is more complicated than it looks. Edmund and I had an arrangement." "What arrangement?" "I helped him set it up. Financially, in the early stages. We had an understanding that I'd have a stake when things stabilized. Do you have that in writing?" "A beat. Edmund wasn't always great about formalizing things. It was more of a family agreement." "Can you send me whatever documentation you have?" I said. "I want to review everything before I make any decisions." "Of course," he said. "I'll put something together." We hung up. I wrote down the exact words he'd used and the time of the call. 3 days later, he emailed a PDF. The first page was the fabricated contract. The second was a letter from someone claiming to be a witness to a verbal agreement. The third was a bank statement that didn't have Edmund's name on it, just Theo's, showing a withdrawal from 4 years ago that he claimed was a loan to his brother. I forwarded everything to Mr. Holt. He called me back within the hour. "The signature on that contract has been flagged by the handwriting analyst I consulted yesterday. Informally, she says it's not Edmund's. Formally, if you want to pursue this, we'd need to file with the probate court and potentially refer this to law enforcement." What would filing do? It would freeze any attempt to claim a stake in the estate until the court reviews the documents. It would also put Theo on notice that you're not handling this informally. "File it," I said. The freeze went through the following week. Theo called 3 times in the 2 days after that, each time a different version of the same message. He just wanted to talk. He wasn't trying to cause problems. He thought we could work this out between family. On the 3rd call, I told him clearly that all further communication needed to go through Mr. Holt, and that I would not be responding to personal contact about the property. He hung up without saying anything. I drove back to Lubbock the next morning and spent the day going through the bins in Unit 14 more carefully. Edmund had been meticulous. Every year of operating records was in its own labeled folder. Vendor contracts, tenant agreements, maintenance logs, insurance documents. The facility had been running clean and profitable for 7 years with no debt and no complications. The only complication ever had been his brother. Near the bottom of the last bin, I found a smaller envelope tucked under a folder. My name on the front, in Edmund's handwriting with the word last written in the corner. Inside was a single folded page. Nadia. You're in the unit, which means you've done everything right. I'm proud of you, even if I'm not there to say it out loud. I know this was a lot to find alone. I should have told you earlier. I kept thinking I had more time to fix the Theo situation before it touched you, and then I didn't. The facility is yours. Cheryl is good at her job, and she'll help you manage it. I'd suggest keeping it rather than selling. It'll bring in steady income for a long time if you let it. But that's your call. I wanted to give you options, not obligations. In the red bin, there's also a folder labeled Commission. It's a referral agreement I had with a commercial property broker named Mr. Estes in Lubbock. He's been doing good work for me. If you ever want to expand, call him first. I love you. I'm sorry I kept things complicated. I just wanted to make sure you were taken care of before I went. I sat in that chair for a long time after I read it. The probate court date was set for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, I met with Mr. Estes, who turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his 60s who had known Edmund since the first year of the facility. He showed me spreadsheets, occupancy rates, comparable properties. He walked me through what the facility would sell for, substantially more than the original purchase, and what it was worth to hold. Your husband was building something, he said. He wasn't finished. I took that home with me and sat with it for a few days. The day before the court hearing, Theo's attorney reached out to Mr. Holt with a proposed settlement. Theo would drop all claims in exchange for a one-time payment of $40,000, characterized as repayment of the alleged loan. I declined. The hearing itself was quiet. The courtroom was a standard county room with fluorescent lights and wood paneling. Theo was there with his attorney, a man who looked young and tired. Our side had the facility records, the handwriting analysis, Cheryl's written account, the notarized letter from Edmund, the 11 escalating request letters, and Mr. Dia wrote, Holt, who had been doing estate law for 30 years and didn't raise his voice once. The judge reviewed everything and denied Theo's claim with a written finding that the signature on the alleged partnership contract was not consistent with documented samples of the decedent's handwriting. She noted that the referral to the district attorney's office for possible forgery investigation was at the court's discretion and that she would be making that referral. Theo left without looking at me. Outside, the sun was bright and flat the way it gets in Lubbock in the afternoon. Mr. Hare, Holt shook my hand on the courthouse steps. Edmund would be pleased, he said. He should have just told me, I said. He should have, Mr. Holt agreed. But he trusted you to handle it. And you did. I drove back to the facility on the way home. Cheryl was closing up the office for the day, a ring of keys in her hand. How'd it go? She asked. We won, I said. She nodded once, like this was the only acceptable outcome. I'll put fresh bulbs in the lights down row 2 this week, she said. Edmund had been meaning to. I walked the property one time before I left. The units sat in their clean rows in the late afternoon light, 32 doors, all locked, all full of other people's things being kept safe. It was an ordinary thing, a storage facility on a flat road outside Lubbock. It was also 7 years of my husband's quiet, careful work, built in the hours between his other life, funded by a grandfather's gift he'd kept for something he believed in. I understood, standing there, why he hadn't sold it when Theo started pushing. Not because the money mattered more than peace, but because it was his, and he built it clean, and he wasn't willing to let someone claim credit for something they'd had no part in. I understood that the way I understand most things about Edmund, slowly from the outside, reconstructing what he meant by the things he didn't say. I called my mother-in-law on the drive home. She picked up on the second ring. Nadia, she said, I heard there was a court date. There was, I said. It's settled. The property is mine. The judge made a referral to the DA's office about the signature issue. A long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was careful. I'm sorry you were put in this position. I know you are, I said. We didn't talk about Theo. We talked about Edmund, a memory she had of him at 15, building something in the garage, showing her the finished thing with the same quiet pride he'd shown me 100 times over 7 years. The memory matched the man. It matched the facility. It matched the chair in Unit 14 and the yellow legal pad and the careful, thorough, private way he tried to take care of everything before he ran out of time. I got home after dark. I made dinner and ate it standing at the counter and didn't turn the television on. In the morning, I emailed Mr. Tebelishan SDs about expansion options, opened a separate account to manage the facility income, and called Cheryl to let her know I'd be coming back the following week to go through the operational side properly. The facility is running now the way it's been running for 7 years. Cheryl sends me a monthly summary. Occupancy is at 94%. The new lights in row 2 are in. Edmund's last letter is in my desk drawer. I don't need to read it anymore. I know what it says, and I'm living what it asked me to do. Not because he left instructions, but because it turns out I'm the kind of person who finishes what someone she loved started. That's something he knew before I did.